Okay, let's try and unpack this. Imagine a civilization, right? Thriving for what? Over 1,000 years without a single coin. They built these monumental palaces completely unfortified and somehow managed this huge, intricate trade network across the ancient seas. How on earth did they achieve that? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating and maybe surprising world of the Minoan palace economy.
It's a truly remarkable story, actually. It shows how interconnected everything was in their society, from their unique geography and climate right through to their profound religious beliefs. It all seemed to revolve around this really ingenious system for collecting, managing, and then redistributing resources. We'll explore the sophisticated mechanisms that allowed the Minoans on Crete to flourish for so long before, before their eventual turbulent decline.
Yeah, and our journey today is supported by this incredible wealth of sources. We've got groundbreaking archaeological findings, meticulous geographical analyses, and these crucial interpretations of their ancient administrative records. You put them together, and they paint this vivid, really detailed picture of this ancient economic powerhouse. Our mission, as always, is to uncover those foundational insights that made the Minoan civilization tick, and maybe consider what their unique non-monetary economic model can perhaps teach us even today.
Well, this deep dive, it really pushes us to ask a fundamental question, doesn't it? How did a Bronze Age society, lacking so many of the financial and logistical tools we just take for granted today,
Sure.
how did they manage such immense complexity, such scale?
Yeah.
We'll be looking not just at the what, but the how and the why, the practicalities, the logistics, and the deep cultural underpinnings that really define their extraordinary system. One, the setting the stage. Crete's natural gifts in early society.
Right. Let's begin by setting the scene then. The island of Crete itself. It's strategically nestled right there in the heart of the Aegean Sea, a true crossroads of the ancient world. Our sources really highlight its perfect positioning. It acted like this crucial bridge, didn't it, between the rich mining areas of Anatolia to the east, the overflowing agricultural bounty of the Nile Delta down south, and those thriving port cities over in the Levant to the southeast. I mean, talk about prime real estate. You couldn't really ask for a more perfectly placed hub for trade and cultural exchange. And this wasn't just geographical luck, was it? It seems like it was the very bedrock upon which their entire economic system would eventually be built.
Absolutely. And this geographical diversity, it was far more than just, pretty scenery. It was the engine of their agricultural wealth. Crete's varied landscape allowed for this incredible array of goods to be produced, which naturally led to early specialization across the island. Think about the sheer range. The major plains, places like Masara, Amari, and Lassithi, they were, ideally suited for cultivating staple cereals like wheat and barley, along with essential legumes. Then you have the hillsides, covered in these meticulously engineered limestone terraces. And on those, they perfected this truly ingenious system of grape olive twin cropping. Now, this wasn't just planting two crops near each other. It was a kind of symbiotic agricultural strategy. The deep roots of the olive trees helped retain moisture for the shallower-rooted grapevines, so both could thrive in that dry Mediterranean climate. And then along the fertile coastal plains, they cultivated higher-value plants like flax for textiles and linseed oil, and even dates, which, fascinatingly, likely originated from Egypt, shows early agricultural experimentation, adaptation. This natural bounty meant Crete could generate significant agricultural surpluses. And that's really a prerequisite for any complex economy, isn't it?
And it wasn't just what they grew, but the island's unique topography and climate that created these diverse microecological niches, right? You mentioned the mountains Ida, Dikti, Lefka Ori, towering over 2,000 meters, yet incredibly close to the coastal plains. That dramatic elevation change over short distances, combined with the typical Mediterranean climate, rainy winters, long, dry summers, that fostered this unparalleled product variety, didn't it? So for the Aegean region around, say, 2700 BC, this meant immense potential for surplus, far beyond what single climate regions could achieve. This environmental richness wasn't just a convenience. It sounds like it was the foundational resource that allowed an economy built on surplus to even exist.
Exactly. And that surplus capability extended beyond just crops. Livestock played an incredibly important role, too. We have evidence of widespread semi-nomadic groups across the island, expertly raising goats and sheep. These herds provided crucial inputs to the developing economy. Wool for textiles, obviously, cheese as a dairy product, and meat. Fishing, naturally, was another complementary branch, making full use of the abundant Aegean fish stocks. But it's important to understand, This regional exchange and specialization, this ability to produce different things in different areas and trade them, was already well underway before the construction of those colossal palatial complexes that came later. The infrastructure, you could say, for economic interaction and resource sharing was already developing organically. It really set the stage for a more centralized system down the line.
And it wasn't just what they produced on land. How they moved it was key. The sea was their highway, their main channel for commerce and connection. Crete's coastline, it's naturally dotted with these harbor indentations, perfect for sheltering ships, right?
Yes, ideal for seafaring.
And those mountains, the same ones creating the microclimates, they also provided another critical resource: timber. Lots of it.
Abundant timber reserves, primarily cedar and pine, yes. Ideal for building sturdy, ocean-going ships.
And these weren't simple boats, were they? They were constructing multi-hulled, oared sailing vessels designed for speed and maneuverability.
Quite sophisticated for the time, and coupled with favorable wind patterns which created predictable sailing windows for vital routes like, say, Athens to Alexandria. Crete possessed this undeniable natural infrastructure for extensive maritime activity. It gave them a massive competitive advantage in the Bronze Age age.
Okay, so they could build the ships and sail them effectively. How did that feed into trade, especially for things they didn't have themselves, like obsidian?
Right, obsidian is a perfect example. It's a volcanic glass, crucial for sharp tools and ornaments back then. Crete itself had no natural obsidian deposits, none at all. However, archaeological findings clearly show that Minoans expertly imported raw obsidian from islands like Melos and Giali. Then, once it was on Crete, it was transformed in specialized workshops into these finely crafted finished blades, intricate ornaments, which were then re-exported across the Aegean and beyond. This demonstrates not only a high level of craftsmanship, but also Crete's role as a vital manufacturing and distribution hub, adding significant value to raw materials before sending them back out.
So by 2700 BC, we're seeing this widespread network. Villages, towns, all connected by trade, exchange, maybe kinship ties. It sounds like a pretty functional, decentralized society.
It was, largely. And this leads us to a pivotal question. What forces then prompted the centralization, the move towards these massive palace economies? Our sources suggest that while this network of, let's say, loosely connected settlements was robust, the sheer volume of surplus products being generated, the increasing complexity of interregional exchange, it eventually demanded something more. The existing systems kind of reached their limit. They needed an institutional gravitational center, if you will. So this centralization was likely triggered by the pressing need for a formal, organized entity, something capable of undertaking the large-scale storage, meticulous accounting, and the systematic circulation of these burgeoning surplus products. It's precisely at this point, driven by the demands of managing increasing abundance, that the unique Minoan palace economy model truly emerged. 2. The rise of the palaces, a chronological journey.
Okay, so the stage is set. The need for some kind of central hub is becoming clear. It's really interesting how we see the early signs of this shift, this societal evolution, around 2700 BC, even before the grand palaces physically dominated the landscape. What specific archaeological clues point towards this emerging complexity, this hierarchy?
Well, some of the most compelling evidence from this early Minoan III to middle Minoan IA period comes from changes in burial practices, particularly the architecture. We see this really significant shift away from simple subterranean pit graves, which were pretty common for everyone, towards more elaborate, stone-lined tholo tombs. These are circular, often kind of beehive-shaped structures, like the ones found down in the Masara Plain. Building these required considerable communal labor, planning, organization. Their mere existence immediately signals a growing difference in social status.
Right, not everyone could command that kind of resource.
Exactly. And furthermore, within these more elaborate tombs, and also in some early elite residences, archaeologists find concentrations of high-value, non-local goods. Things like exquisite silver pins, beautiful imported lapis lazuli beads from far away, and those meticulously crafted obsidian microblades we talked about. The fact that these precious items were concentrated in the hands of a relatively narrow elite points directly to increasing wealth accumulation and a clear social stratification starting to solidify across the island.
So it wasn't just about piling up wealth, it was also about cementing their position, their authority. How did these early elites legitimize their growing power beyond just having fancier stuff?
That's crucial. Beyond the material, religious political legitimacy played an absolutely vital role in this nascent social stratification. Our sources highlight the growing importance of hilltop sacred sites, often called peak sanctuaries. These weren't just isolated spots for worship, they functioned as vital regional cult centers, drawing people from surrounding communities for communal rituals for offerings. Now, By controlling these important religious locations, or perhaps by being seen as intermediaries with the deities honored there, early elites could tap into this powerful source of authority that went beyond just economic or military strength. It allowed them to bind disparate communities together through shared belief and ritual. And that laid a critical foundation for the later deeply integrated religious and administrative functions of the palatial system.
And what about craftsmanship at this stage? Were they already producing those really intricate artistic pieces we associate with Minoan art?
Well, in these early stages, the craftsmanship was still evolving, but you can definitely see the beginnings of what would become that distinctive Minoan artistry. We see widespread pre-Kamara's pottery. It's characterized by simpler, often linear motifs, typically dark on light or light on dark styles. Now, it's not yet the incredibly intricate, eggshell-thin masterpieces of later periods that we, marvel at today, but its prevalence and increasing technical sophistication indicate that artisan specialization was certainly starting to emerge. This was still mostly on a regional scale, happening largely outside of what would become those massive palace-controlled workshops. But it shows the essential groundwork, the technical skills, the aesthetic sensibilities that would later just blossom under the patronage and organization of the palaces.
Then, around the early 20th century BC, something truly transformative happens. The first large-scale palatial structures begin to appear across Crete: Knossos, Phaistos, Malea. What was the driving purpose behind these really monumental constructions? Were they just fancy houses for kings?
Oh, much more than that. These first palaces, emerging around 2000 BC at those major sites you mentioned, and likely Petrosutea too, they were, fundamentally, highly sophisticated economic engines. Their primary purpose seems to have been to function as grand regional hub centers, specifically dedicated to the systematic collection and redistribution of agricultural surplus. Think of them as colossal, multifunctional nerve centers, designed for sophisticated storage, meticulous accounting, and the centralized management of an entire region's resources. They represented a really revolutionary step in large-scale economic organization for the Bronze Age agent.
And when you say immense quantities for storage, it's hard to really visualize that scale. Can you give us a concrete example? Just how much could they actually hold?
The scale is, well, staggering. Let's take the palace at Knossos. We find this vast western storage wing. Inside, there are 18 parallel corridor-shaped storerooms.
Yeah.
These aren't small cupboards. They were designed to house over 420 enormous piphoi, those massive ceramic jars, sometimes taller than a person. And this translates to an approximate storage capacity of an incredible 246,000 liters. Now, to put that into perspective, our sources suggest this quantity could represent a substantial portion of the annual grain consumption for an estimated regional population of maybe 30,000 to 35,000 people. This wasn't just a pantry, it was a strategic food reserve, a demonstration of immense logistical ambition, and, a symbol of stability for a significant population.
Then, around 1700 BC, disaster. Archaeological evidence points to a massive earthquake, right?
Yes, a major seismic event.
But instead of abandoning these sites, the Minoans rebuilt. And they rebuilt bigger and better. What does this tell us about their society's resilience and just how important these palaces were and what defined these rebuilt neopalatial complexes?
It's a truly remarkable testament to both their resilience and the undeniable centrality of the palace system to their entire civilization. Despite what was probably a IXX intensity earthquake on the Richter scale around 1700 BC, which would have utterly devastated those earlier protopalatial structures, this catastrophe wasn't the end. Instead, it almost acted as an unexpected catalyst. It spurred the construction of even larger, multi-storied, and incredibly labyrinthine new palace complexes. This is what we call the Second Palace, or Neo-Palatial period, lasting roughly from 1700 down to 1450 BC. These new palaces were architecturally much more elaborate, boasting complex internal layouts and more intricately integrated functions.
So they essentially turned a major disaster into an opportunity to upgrade and refine the whole system. What did these magnificent new palaces actually look like? How were they laid out?
Their typical neo-palatial architecture reveals this astonishingly organized and functional design. You generally find the storage and workshop zones concentrated in the northwest wing of the palace. This strategic placement kept the main economic and manufacturing activities somewhat separate, yet still directly connected to the administrative and residential areas. Efficiency, right?
Makes sense.
The east wing, in contrast, was usually reserved for the more aristocratic living quarters and grand display spaces, reflecting the elite's lifestyle and power. And crucially, right at the heart of the complex was a very large central courtyard. This served as the communal, ceremonial, and festival area, the true hub of public life and ritual. These complexes also featured remarkable architectural innovations for their time. Things like light wells, which ingeniously channeled natural light deep into the multi-storied structures. And they used these multifunctional pier and door partitions, allowing for incredibly flexible spaces that could be opened up for large gatherings or closed off for privacy or specific tasks. And of course, their walls were adorned with those stunning, vibrant plaster fresco programs, telling stories through art about their world, their beliefs, their prosperity.
And after this rebuilding phase, Knossos, which was already a major center, expanded to truly unprecedented proportions. It became the administrative and economic focal point, didn't it? What does this centralization tell us about their power structure, especially given that striking fact these enormous palaces were built without any surrounding defensive walls?
Indeed. After the earthquake, Knossos really swelled. It became twice the size of Malea and Phaistos combined during this Neopalatial period. It consolidated administrative records, external trade flow. Everything seemed to centralize there. This sheer growth suggests an unprecedented centralization of power and a more integrated hierarchical network across the island, all revolving around Knossos. And you've touched upon one of the most intriguing aspects, that striking absence of surrounding walls. Unlike virtually every other contemporary Bronze Age civilization, the Minoans didn't build massive fortifications around their key centers. Now, this lack of defensive walls is often cited as the origin of the Minoan thalassocracy, or sea dominance, legend. It implies this profound sense of security derived not from land defenses, but from their naval supremacy.
They felt safe because they ruled the waves.
It suggests they believed their control of the seas was so absolute that no land-based attack was a credible threat. This allowed them to focus their resources elsewhere on trade, internal prosperity rather than on military defenses. Their power was projected outward across the sea. 3. The palace as a living machine. Architecture and economy intertwined.
It's still hard to get your head around the sheer scale of these palaces. But as you've said, they weren't just grand buildings for show. Every part of their labyrinthine design served a practical economic purpose. How did these complex layouts actually help run such a vast economy, especially one without money?
Well, the multi-story labyrinthine plans were incredibly purposeful. They weren't just for grandeur or mystique, they were strategically designed. They compartmentalized the logistical flow of goods, streamlined movement, and crucially restricted unauthorized access to sensitive areas like the storage depots. Imagine the complex flow agricultural products coming in, raw materials, finished goods going out, people, information, all within this vast complex. These designs allowed for highly efficient internal movement and secure storage. For instance, those narrow, corridor-wide the storage rooms, they were specifically engineered for low heat and low light conditions, ideal for preserving the contents of those large pithoi, preventing spoilage. And meticulously integrated into these storage areas were small control niches, almost like ancient inventory checkpoints for tracking products. It shows remarkable attention to detailed management.
That's fascinating, the physical design directly supporting a precise accounting and security system. What about Crete's climate? You mentioned adaptation before. How did the architecture specifically deal with the weather?
Their architecture was remarkably climate adaptive. It shows this deep understanding of their environment. The courtyard-focused plans, often designed with that specific 2.1 length-to-width ratio, weren't arbitrary. This proportion was carefully chosen to maximize exposure to the low winter sun angles, providing warmth and light when needed most. But maybe more critically for those long, hot summers, these courtyards were strategically positioned to create wind corridors. This facilitated natural ventilation throughout the massive complex. This sophisticated understanding of passive cooling and heating was essential, not just for comfortable living and working conditions, but crucially for the long-term preservation of the vast quantities of stored goods in the depots. It was really ingenious ecological engineering.
And it wasn't just about practical design, was it? It's absolutely fascinating how deeply integrated their sacred beliefs, their cosmic understanding, were with their practical architectural designs. These palaces weren't merely warehouses or admin centers, they were also deeply sacred spaces, physically connected to their deities and the landscape itself. How did they achieve that integration?
The integration was profound, yes, bordering on the sacred. Even the engineering details, while practical, often carried symbolic resonance. Robust stairwells, ingenious plaster stone buttresses supporting upper wooden beams, efficient rainwater channeling systems. Yes, they were practical, they reduced maintenance costs, but they also demonstrated the palace's mastery over natural resources and complex construction, reflecting the elite's organizational power. More profoundly, though, there was this conscious, almost spiritual alignment of the palace plans with the surrounding topography. The central courtyard of Knossos, for instance, was meticulously aligned with the sacred Mount Juctus, a major peak sanctuary.
Ah,
Okay, similarly, Phaistos was aligned with Mount Ida. This wasn't accidental. It imbued the palaces with this powerful religious political symbolism. It physically linked the seat of earthly power with the sacred landscape and the deities believed to reside there, further legitimizing the palatial elite and their control over the land's bounty.
And the art found within these palaces, those stunning, vibrant frescoes, they weren't just decorative either, were they? They served a deeper purpose, almost like ancient propaganda, visually telling a story about their wealth, their power, the system itself.
You've hit on a crucial point there. The fresco programs were a sophisticated visual language. They powerfully linked the palace's economy with its ruling ideology. Themes like the Sun Bull Farm triad appear frequently, visually representing fertility, strength, agricultural abundance, the literal lifeblood of their society. A prime example is the parade frescoes on the walls of the Grand Western Staircase at Knossos. These vibrant murals depict detailed scenes of carriers bringing in raw materials, luxury goods from foreign lands. This wasn't just pretty art. It explicitly emphasized the synchronization of palace activities with far-reaching external trade networks. It was a clear message to anyone entering. This palace is the source of our prosperity, the hub for local production and international exchange, a testament to its organizing power.
And what about those iconic bull leaping scenes? Were they also part of this broader economic and ideological message beyond just being thrilling
Oh,
spectacles?
absolutely. While they were certainly thrilling public spectacles, the bull leaping scenes are often interpreted as showcasing both extraordinary ritual courage and, importantly, the social harmony and order achieved under the managerial power of the palace. On one level, yes, it's a daring, athletic, or ritual feat, a display of human prowess. But within the broader context of the palace economy, they could also symbolize the taming of nature's wild, untamed power represented by the powerful bull, by human skill, and by extension by the organized, controlling power of the palace elite. It was a potent visual metaphor for the palace's ability to bring order, prosperity, civilization itself to the world around it. This made the system's legitimacy and the elite's benevolent authority palpable, compelling for the populace. 4. Fueling the system. Agriculture and rural life.
Okay, so how did this sophisticated palace economy, with its vast storage and elaborate administration, actually get its fuel? It all started, as you'd expect, with the land. Despite challenges like Crete's long summer droughts, the Minoans developed some incredibly innovative farming techniques. What kind of agricultural innovation are we talking about here?
Well, the climatic data paints a clear picture. Annual rainfall on Crete was relatively modest, 400, 650 millimeter maybe, and their limestone soils, while fertile, absorbed water quickly, leading to rapid drainage. This necessitated the extensive and really ingenious use of terrace farming, known locally as pizzules. Imagine meticulously built stone walls, almost like giant steps carved into the hillsides. These weren't just for looks, they were brilliant hydrological engineering. The terrace walls were crucial because they effectively retained precious rainwater, stopping it from just rushing off the slopes. This created vital pockets of moisture that kept their essential olive, grape, and fig trees thriving even through those long, parched summers. This system, which had roots in earlier periods, underwent a massive expansion after 1700 BC. It became large-scale institutional projects that literally transformed the edges of the Masara and Lasiti plains. It's a prime example of their sustainable and highly productive agricultural practices.
And this raises an important question. What were the specific products that were the backbone of this economy, beyond just olives and grapes, and how did they manage the diverse output from the countryside to feed the centralized palatial system?
The primary grain production focused on hardy wheat varieties, emmer and einkorn alongside barley, and a smaller amount of millet. These crucial grains were stored not only in those colossal pithoi we've mentioned, but also in stone-based silos, known as coolers. These were large, circular, often subterranean pits, and in various smaller pottery vessels too. Now, to protect these vital food resources against threats like rodents and moisture, the depot floors were meticulously coated with a bitumen plaster, often mixed with olive oil, creating a sealed, protective layer.
very thorough.
It wasn't just putting grain in a pot, it was a well-thought-out system to preserve large quantities for long periods. Furthermore, archaeobotanical evidence confirms their widespread use of polyculture, a remarkably advanced practice for the time. Nitrogen-fixing legumes like fava beans, lentils, chickpeas, and flaxseed were systematically rotated with cereals. This innovative crop rotation preserved soil nutrient cycles, preventing barrenness from monoculture and ensuring sustained long-term agricultural productivity.
But it wasn't just grains. Olive oil and wine were absolutely massive components of their economy, not just as basic foodstuffs, but as high-value prestige items, even fuel.
Ah.
How did they produce and utilize these versatile products on such a grand scale?
Right, olive and grape cultivation on those limestone slopes provided a dual benefit. They effectively stabilized the soil, preventing erosion, while simultaneously yielding incredibly high-value secondary products, olive oil and wine. The processing was an intensive, centralized operation. During the summer harvest peak, crushing and pressing operations took place in large stone trough press beds, meticulously integrated within the palace workshop complexes, and nothing went to waste. The residual pomace, the solid remains after pressing, was ingeniously reused as animal feed or even as an additive for soap or fuel, shows their resourcefulness.
Impressive.
Olive oil, in particular, was vital beyond just food. It was the main fuel for the thousands of lamps found throughout the palaces. This enabled continuous administrative meetings, craft production, elaborate religious rituals, even during palace nights, extending the productive day. Wine, on the other hand, was very likely a prestige beverage, a symbol of status, consumed primarily during grand festival rituals and elite banquets, reinforcing social hierarchy and communal bonding.
And let's not forget the wool. You mentioned the semi-nomadic shepherds earlier. They were absolutely crucial, a foundational part of this entire system, especially for the palace's flourishing textile industry. How did the palace manage to integrate these more mobile, decentralized communities into such a meticulously centralized economic machine?
It's a brilliant example of how they bridge different economic modes, actually. The semi-nomadic shepherd communities, primarily raising sheep and goat herds in the less fertile mountain regions, provided three essential inputs to the palace economy: a continuous supply of wool, cheese, and meat. These critical resources flowed from the periphery to the center. The large population palace centers, in turn, specialized in processing this raw wool, which was shorn twice annually. This work took place in dedicated textile workshops, often located on the upper floors of the western wing, maximizing light and ventilation. Here, the wool was meticulously cleaned, spun, and dyed using an impressive array of plant-based pigments: ladanum, the highly prized sea snail purple, porphyra, madder root.
Giving those vibrant colors we see depicted.
Exactly. These natural dyes created incredibly rich fabrics, and they served a dual purpose. They were used as showy pieces for island tributes to the palace, reinforcing its authority, and, very significantly, as valuable export items in their thriving external trade network, bringing in resources that Crete itself didn't produce. 5. The heartbeat of the economy: redistribution and administration.
Okay, so let's really delve into this concept. The Minoan economy is famously described as redistributive. What does that actually mean in practice? How did everything, grains, oil, wool, flow both to and from the palace, especially without any form of money?
Right. The Minoan palace economy is arguably one of the most sophisticated early examples of a redistributive model anywhere in the ancient world. Here's how it essentially worked. Instead of buying and selling with currency, village and town producers, the farmers, the shepherds would deliver specific assessed quantities of their goods directly to the central palace, whether it was grain, oil, wool, honey, wine, livestock. It wasn't arbitrary. It was based on a meticulously recorded system using that linear A script we mentioned.
Even though we can't fully read it.
Exactly. We can't fully read the language, but we can absolutely understand its numerical and logistical logic. Quantities were expressed with precise vertical and horizontal notches for decimal and hundreds values, and unique circular signs for thousands. The palace bureaucracy meticulously recorded every single one of these inputs on clay tablets, creating this comprehensive ledger. Then, periodically, the palace would redistribute these accumulated resources. Now, this redistribution wasn't solely driven by immediate need. It took various forms: rations for laborers working on palace projects, essential inputs for the palace workshops producing finished goods, or strategic expenditures for communal rituals and festivals. The undeniable presence of a numerical system and distinct fraction symbols, plasmatograms, unequivocally demonstrates that incredibly detailed accounting was the central nervous system of this entire system. It was a sophisticated ledger system, not a marketplace driven by prices.
That's a truly ingenious system. And it's fascinating that this redistribution wasn't purely transactional, like just paying for goods or labor. It was also deeply tied to social cohesion and, crucially, the palace's legitimacy in the eyes of the people. How did they achieve that vital connection?
That's a critical insight into their societal structure, absolutely. These accrual distribution operations went far beyond mere economic necessity. They were a powerful, deliberate tool for fostering social solidarity and reinforcing the ideological legitimacy of the palace elite. The palace, as the central authority, actively financed grand feasts and elaborate festivals. And these weren't just simple celebrations. They were highly strategic, visible displays of the palace's immense generosity and its benevolent capacity to provide for the entire populace. By orchestrating these events, the palace publicly demonstrated its ability to gather vast resources and then share them, creating a sense of collective well-being and dependence on the central authority.
So those famous bull leaping festivals we've talked about, for instance, were more than just entertainment. They were, in a very real sense, a form of economic and political propaganda.
Precisely. The bull-leaping festivals, famously held in the Grand Central courtyards, were immense public spectacles witnessed by thousands. They weren't just thrilling. They staged this profound, symbolic message.
Ooh.
The taming of the terrifying bull's raw, wild power by human courage and skill. This symbolized the protective might and sophisticated organizing ability of the managerial elite. They were demonstrating their control over powerful forces, extending that metaphorically to their control over resources and society itself. The logistics for these elaborate ceremonies were astonishing. The meticulous procurement of sacrificial animals, the organized flow of vast quantities of beer and wine, the precise provision of bread and meat rations for thousands of guests. All of this was meticulously tied into the palace's record-keeping system. Each festival not only collectively consumed strategic excess of surplus stock, which conveniently reduced storage stress on the palatial depots after harvest, but more importantly, it made the palace's generosity and its indispensable central role in the community visibly apparent. It cemented their authority by demonstrating their capacity to provide abundance and orchestrate collective prosperity. 6. Crafting wealth, artisan production, and external trade.
Stepping inside the palace walls, it's astonishing to realize these immense structures weren't just admin centers or religious sites. They were, in essence, gigantic industrial powerhouses. What kind of goods were they actually producing on this grand scale within the palace walls?
It's truly impressive, isn't it? The western and northern wings of the neo-palatial palaces were essentially bustling industrial zones. Archaeological excavations have revealed clear evidence of ceramic kilns, indicating pottery production on a massive, highly organized scale. There were metal smelting hearths, showcasing their advanced capabilities in metallurgy, transforming raw ores into tools and weapons. And stone and ivory processing workshops reveal incredibly sophisticated craftsmanship, carving intricate details into hard materials. These weren't small-scale individual artisan efforts. They were integrated, palace-controlled manufacturing operations, employing specialized labor to produce goods both for internal consumption and, critically, for trade.
And the pottery they produce, particularly that Kamars ware, it's so distinctive, so beautiful. How does that fit into their broader economic system? Was it just for local elites?
The Kamaras-type pottery is a perfect illustration of their high-value production. These were exceptionally fine, eggshell-thin cups and vessels, often adorned with incredibly intricate cream, orange, and white spiral or plant motifs, creating these striking light contrast color plays. Their discovery in elite Minoan dining settings confirms their aesthetic value and status within Crete, yes. But what's truly remarkable is their discovery among palace refuse in Egypt, statistically at a site called Tel El Daba.
Ah, okay, so it traveled.
Exactly. This unequivocally tells us two things. First, they were highly valued across borders for their beauty and craftsmanship. And second, their presence abroad indicates a thriving, long-distance cross-border trade in luxury goods. The payment for such items, while not in cash, would have been meticulously recorded as external input in the palace accounts, giving us a clear record of their international trade balance.
What about metallurgy? Were they equally advanced in processing metals for tools, weapons, even ornaments?
Absolutely. The metallurgy workshops were operated by highly skilled artisans. They primarily processed Cypriot copper ingots, which were shaped into various forms. Ingots themselves for easier transport, sheets for larger objects, wires for intricate detailing. From these raw materials, they produced a wide range of functional and ceremonial items, robust bronze knives, precise chisels, and those iconic double-bladed Labrys axes, often strengthened with tin alloys for superior durability. And beyond utilitarian tools, their gold craftsmanship was truly remarkable. They employed advanced gold foil overlay techniques for ornaments found in lead female burials. These rival the intricacy, artistry, and technical brilliance of contemporary Egyptian gold craftsmanship. That level of specialization and skill was a significant part of their economic strength.
And perfume production, that sounds like a really high value, maybe even exotic product for the Bronze Age.
It certainly was. Perfume production was a multi-stage, complex process. It indicates a sophisticated understanding of chemistry and distillation for the time.
Hmm.
It involved their staple olive oil as a base, mixed with aromatic local plants like lavender and sage, and often, critically, imported myrrh resin, which underscores its luxury status.
Right, the imported ingredient.
Yes. This complex process required high-temperature controlled cauldrons and intricate distillation sequences. Such specialized, labor-intensive production demanding specific ingredients and technical expertise points to another high-value export item that significantly contributed to the palace economy's overall wealth and its standing in the wider Aegean.
We've touched on textiles briefly, but how extensive was this industry within the palaces? Given their reliance on those semi-nomadic shepherds, it sounds like a perfect fit, doesn't it?
It was an absolutely central industry. We find numerous heavy loom weights in the textile workshops and countless spindle whorls, those small discs used to weight a spindle during thread making. This suggests a significant presence of specialized female workers, often employed on the palace's upper floors, likely to utilize the natural light better. They had an incredibly rich and diverse color palette at their disposal, thanks to those natural dyes sourced from local plants saffron, the highly precious sea snail, purple porphyra, madder root. Depictions on vases and frescoes confirm the vibrant and elaborate clothing and tapestries they produced. These textiles were not just functional items, they were artistic expressions and significantly major trade goods. Again, demonstrating that sophisticated integration of agricultural production, specialized craftsmanship, and robust commerce within the palace system. And all this remarkable internal production from grains to luxury goods, it wasn't solely for domestic consumption. It was the absolute backbone of their impressive sea trade. And that's what truly solidified the concept of Minoan thalassocracy, sea dominance.
So let's delve into that concept of thalassocracy. What specifically made their seafaring so powerful and effective across the Aegean? It wasn't just having boats, was it?
No, not at all. The Minoan palace economy, with its vast surpluses and high-value manufactured goods, simply couldn't have sustained itself without a robust outward flow key of goods from the island. The true strength of Minoan seafaring rested on several critical pillars. Firstly, their ships. They utilized fast and maneuverable, multi-hulled, oared sailing ships. These weren't flimsy reed boats. They had incredibly sturdy hulls, expertly constructed from the abundant pine and cypress beams harvested from their mountain slopes.
Ah, the timber again.
Exactly. This gave them significant advantages in open sea navigation, speed, and cargo capacity compared to many contemporary vessels. Secondly, they maintained a regular maintenance and shipyard network across the Aegean. But this was crucial for sustained maritime activity, ensuring their fleet remained in top condition. This sophisticated infrastructure allowed them to project their economic and, implicitly, their political power across the Aegean with unmatched efficiency.
And where were their key trade hubs located? What kind of specific exchanges were happening there? Can we see this system in action?
A prime example of their trading infrastructure is the Kythera trading station, dated to around 1900 BC. This wasn't just a casual stop. It acted as a vital, strategically located hub for Peloponnese Aegean Egypt traffic. Here, Minoan olive oil amphora, a high-value, easily transportable export, would be exchanged for goods like ceramics from the Morea region of Greece and unprocessed lead ingots, critical raw materials for their burgeoning metalworking industry. This illustrates a sophisticated, organized network of exchange, not merely opportunistic bartering.
So it was a true two-way flow of goods, a dynamic system where the Minoans weren't just exporting. What were they bringing into Crete, and what specific products were they sending out in return?
Indeed, it was highly dynamic and reciprocal. Crete imported essential raw materials and exotic luxury goods. From Egypt, they brought in papyrus for writing and precious ivory and gold foil for their craftsmen. From the Levant, they imported cedar timber and mastic resin, valuable for shipbuilding and other uses. From Cyprus, they sourced vital copper and tin, absolutely crucial for their advanced metallurgy. And from Anatolia, they imported obsidian and pitch for ship caulking.
All shopping lists.
Quite. And in return, the Minoan products exported were highly prized across the ancient world. These included their distinctive Kamares pottery, their vibrant dyed textiles, intricately crafted gold and silver vessels, and of course, significant quantities of their agricultural surpluses, like high-quality olive oil and fine wine. Now, this complex system operated entirely without a cash economy. Instead, value was measured by weight, typically using standardized copper ingots or precise fragments of silver. It relied on trust, reputation, and meticulous measurement rather than coined money. It was an international barter system on an unprecedented scale.
So this was much more than just moving goods. It was about projecting power across the waves. The long-standing legend of Minoan thalassocracy, their dominance of the sea seems to have a very real, tangible basis, extending far beyond mere trade, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This maritime dominance was not merely economic. It strategically established a powerful political network across the entire Aegean basin. Archaeological clues provide strong support for the thalassocracy concept.
Hmm.
For instance, evidence suggests Minoan ships regularly suppressed Aegean piracy.
Ah, providing security.
Exactly. Effectively protecting their own vital trade routes and those of their allies, ensuring safe passage for goods. We also find distinct Minoan palace-like elite residences in important places like Aegina and Thera, strongly suggesting Minoan influence, presence, or maybe even direct control over these key island locations. Furthermore, there's a clear chain of what appear to be Minoan colonies or trading outposts extending as far north as the Mallia Station. This collective evidence indicates a broader sphere of influence, where their naval and economic might translated into a widespread political and cultural presence, cementing their authority and control throughout the Aegean. They were the undisputed masters of its waves. 7. Administrative technology. Linear A, beyond the seal, and dispatch centers.
Okay, so we've established this was an incredibly complex economy, managing vast flows of goods, resources across a wide network. And any complex economy needs a sophisticated accounting system, enter Linear A. Still largely a mystery in terms of the spoken language, but its purpose seems unmistakably clear. It was the backbone of their economic administration. How did they manage to track all these goods and exchanges without modern digital tools or even a fully deciphered written language?
That's precisely the remarkable part of Linear A, isn't it? With its corpus of over 1,400 clay tablets and more than 7,300 unique sign sequences, we can, despite its undeciphered language, understand its fundamental numerical and logistical logic. It employed this sophisticated mixed syllabic ideogram numerical sign system. For decimal and hundreds values, they used vertical and horizontal notches, remarkably similar to basic tally marks we still use.
Simple but effective.
Exactly. And for thousands, they utilized distinct circular signs. This precise counting system was incredibly efficient and robust. It allowed the palace bureaucracy to meticulously correlate exact quantities of cereals, oil, wine, wool with the known capacities of their pithoi and amphorae. So even if we can't read every single word or understand the underlying language, we can unequivocally see the meticulous record-keeping of their economic transactions and inventory management. It demonstrates a highly organized and literate administrative core.
What's truly fascinating here isn't just the writing itself, but the physical form of these records and how they were managed. It wasn't merely writing on a tablet, it was an integrated dynamic system designed for the rapid and secure movement of goods, almost like an ancient checkout system. Can you elaborate on that?
Indeed. Most of these tablets were thin clay lavettes, typically about 15–20 centimeters long. They were designed for rapid inscription on wet clay, meaning scribes could quickly record transactions as they happened. Real-time accounting, almost. Once written, they were made permanent by low-heat firing. Now, these tablets weren't just haphazardly tossed aside. They were carefully stored in designated archive rooms within the palace depots, placed on shelves and in specially designed boxes. What's particularly intriguing is the evidence suggesting they were periodically re-moistened and updated. This implies a remarkably active and dynamic record-keeping system, rather than just static ledgers.
Like a living database.
In a way, yes. Furthermore, archaeologists have found remnants of clay-sealed bags and bales. This indicates a sophisticated checkout, or check-a-lose system, as you put it. This suggests a swift and accountable movement of goods on the same site, involving a clear triad, the producer delivering the goods, the recipient receiving them, and the record keeper documenting the transaction. This allowed for very efficient, auditable, and accountable transfers of goods within the palatial system, absolutely vital for an economy operating without currency. 8. Storage infrastructure and logistics architecture.
So where did all this amazing surplus from grains to olive oil, wool, craft goods actually go once it reached the palace? The palaces themselves were designed like massive, highly secure warehouses. Their storage capacity was a spectacle in itself. What did these impressive depot layouts actually look like on the ground?
Right, the storage rooms, or magazines, were typically located in the western wing of the palaces, a strategic placement for security and accessibility. These were designed as long corridor series, often separated by half walls from the central courtyard. Take Nessos again, for example. Its western storage wing featured a main passage stretching over 50 meters, flanked by 18 side-by-side, long, narrow rooms. This layout maximized storage density while maintaining internal accessibility and control. and to combat that pervasive problem of moisture, especially critical for preserving grains, oil, and other perishables over long periods. The floor levels of these rooms were meticulously covered with a specialized lime mortar mixed with crushed seashells. This effectively created a moisture barrier.
What would you find inside these massive rooms, beyond just those giant pithoi? What other items were stored and how were they organized?
Well, beyond the ubiquitous pithoi holding vast quantities of liquids like oil and wine, these rooms also contained intricately built, stone-cased niche cabinets. These were likely for smaller, more valuable or delicate items. Narrow shelves lined the walls, used for dried herbs and spice bundles, indicating a wider range of stored goods beyond just basic foodstuffs. Intriguingly, temporary pits were also discovered within these storage areas, sometimes containing sacrificial animal bones.
Oh, really?
Yes. This suggests a cyclical integration of religious offerings and rituals with the practical management of material resources. Sacred activities might also have served as a way to consume surplus or ritually mark the flow of goods. And it's important to remember, the visible display of their storage capacity from that lavish Western courtyard served a purpose far beyond mere functionality. It was a potent, very deliberate form of economic propaganda.
So it wasn't just practical storage, it was a carefully orchestrated visual statement of immense wealth and power designed to impress and reinforce the palace's authority.
Exactly that. Imagine entering the impressive western courtyard of a Minoan palace and seeing the sheer magnitude and meticulous organization of the depots, brimming with pithoi and other stored goods. This wasn't hidden away. This visible abundance served as potent visual propaganda. It showcased the palace's immense economic grandeur and its unparalleled capacity to manage, accumulate, and provide for the community. It was a tangible, undeniable symbol of their prosperity and the stability that the palace system brought to their world, reinforcing public trust and the elite's central role.
And security was absolutely paramount in managing these vast stores, especially in an economy without currency to pay armies of guards. How did they ensure these immense quantities of goods weren't tampered with or pilfered?
Depot security was maintained through a sophisticated combination of physical barriers and administrative controls. Beyond robust wooden doors and vigilant oversight, they relied heavily on seal band applications. A unique, intricately carved seal would be pressed onto a wet clay strip, which was then applied to a container or maybe even a door. This seal provided undeniable confirmation that the product or storage area had not been accessed or tampered with without authorized official approval. It provided an irrefutable record of integrity for critical goods.
Like an ancient security tag.
A very effective one. Furthermore, those lead weights found in inspection niches across the palaces weren't just random objects. They formed a standardized measurement set. This indicates the existence of a precise Minoan metric system, and that fostered immense trust in trade and transactions, both internally and externally. This standardization was crucial in a non-monetary system where the value and integrity of goods depended entirely on precise, verifiable measurement and clear accountability. 9. Religion, ritual, and economy Kesajimi.
You've mentioned this before, but let's really focus on it. In Minoan Crete, there seems to have been no hard line between temple and treasury. Religion and economy were deeply interwoven. This concept, sometimes called kezajimi, this profound integration of sacred and secular, it seemed central to understanding Minoan society. What does that mean in practical terms? How did the palace harness sacred beliefs to bolster its power and facilitate its economic activities?
Yes, the concept of Kesajimi perfectly captures this fundamental aspect. Unlike many later civilizations, where state and religion became increasingly distinct, the Minoan palace network did not sharply separate secular administration from religious authority. Instead, political legitimacy and economic power were fundamentally strengthened through the ritualized presentation of economic activities. This meant that the acts of collection, storage, redistribution weren't just logistical operations. They were deeply imbued with sacred meaning. This reinforced the palace's central role as both provider and spiritual guardian. The elite weren't just managers, they were also perceived as orchestrators of divine favor and prosperity.
So the very physical spaces within the palaces were designed to reflect and facilitate this profound integration of religion and economic life.
Precisely. Structures found in the central courtyards, like large altars for offerings, lustral basins for ritual purification, and those bull-leaping ramps, they were multifunctional. They facilitated both solemn offerings to deities to avert disasters, ensure fertility, guarantee bountiful harvest, and simultaneously served as stages for grand demonstrations of generosity to the populace. These rituals showcase the palace's benevolence, creating this powerful sense of shared prosperity and divine favor operating under its authority. The communal participation in these events fostered social cohesion and reinforced the palace's indispensable role as the heart of both material and spiritual well-being. And what's truly fascinating here is how those prominent bull-leaping frescoes, for example, served as both a captivating ritual display and a powerful, almost symbolic representation of the elite's control over the very forces of nature and society that underpin their economy.
How did these visually striking frescoes communicate such a complex message to the people watching?
Well, the bull-leaping frescoes are a prime example of this symbolic integration. They visually depicted the taming of the bull's immense wild power by palace-approved human skill. This vividly asserted the elite's ability to bring order and control to the untamed natural world, metaphorically extending this capacity to their management of society and its vital resources. These frescoes also employed distinct color and gender codes: dark red for males, white skin for females, carefully staging and reinforcing established social gender roles.
Interesting detail.
Yes. And the rituals themselves, involving both men and women, represented a deeper message of social peace and harmony. This harmony was presented as a direct outcome of the collective sharing of surplus production, a visible demonstration of the palace's successful management and a justification of its central authority.
And it wasn't just within the palace walls, was it? Sacred sites located throughout the island were also an integral part of this extensive economic religious network, creating a continuous loop of offerings almost.
Yes, absolutely. Religious spaces and activities were not limited to the palace complexes themselves. Sacred peak sanctuaries like Juktas and Petsofas, located high on mountain peaks, and numerous cave sanctuaries such as Idian Andron and Kamares Cave. They played a crucial role in establishing a continuous product offering chain that ran along the entire palace rural axis. Rural communities would bring their offerings, their share of the harvest or livestock, to these significant sacred sites, which were ultimately overseen by the palace's religious and administrative authority.
And these offerings, quantities of oil, wine, wool, they weren't considered economic losses for the palace's meticulous accounting system. That sounds a bit counterintuitive for a highly efficient economy.
Not at all from their perspective. This is a key insight into their unique economic philosophy. The quantities of oil, wine, wool offered to these temples were not considered losses in palace accounting. Instead, they were strategically recorded as investments.
Investments? How so?
These offerings were perceived as a vital expression of a collective demand for fertility, continued agricultural bounty, overall prosperity for the island, all of which was believed to be overseen and facilitated by the political authority of the palace. It underscored the belief that the palace was the central conduit for both material and spiritual well-being, reinforcing its indispensable role. It was like a spiritual tax, perhaps, ensuring the flow of future blessings and solidifying the palace's indispensable role as the intermediary between the divine and the everyday. 10. Turbulent end. Earthquake series, Thera eruption, and collapse, 1450 BC.
Okay, here's where this incredible story takes a really dramatic and ultimately tragic turn. After centuries of unparalleled prosperity, stability, things began to unravel for the Minoan civilization around 1450 BC. It wasn't just one event, was it? It seems like a series of devastating blows. What was the first major natural disaster that struck?
Well, the geological data provides an unequivocal and quite dramatic answer. Around the early 17th century BC, specifically estimated at 1628 Downey's and 25 BC, which is remarkably precise for ancient history, the colossal eruption of the Thera volcano occurred. Modern-day Santorini.
The big one.
The very big one. This wasn't just a localized bang. It triggered a devastating tsunami that crashed onto Crete's northern and eastern coasts. It left behind distinctive layers of debris, and widespread ashfall literally blanketed and salinized vast tracts of their fertile agricultural land in the coastal districts. We have reliable, thick paleo-tsunami deposits, ancient tsunami sediment layers identified on the Malaya coast, for instance. Radiocarbon dating of organic material within these layers definitively confirmed the disaster's timing. Pre-storm deposits date between 1744–1544 BC, and post-storm layers are from 1509–1430 BC. It definitively links this environmental catastrophe to the very end of their Neopalatial Golden Age. It was a truly transformative and crippling event.
It's clear these natural disasters weren't isolated incidents, though. What's crucial to understand is how they crippled the very logistical backbone of the palace economy. How did this combination of environmental catastrophes inflict such profound systemic damage?
Right. Beyond the tsunami, the same century saw a series of incredibly destructive IXX intensity earthquakes generated by the Aegean's highly active tectonic regime, notably on faults like Spili and Oggi Galeni. These seismic events systematically caused the load-bearing walls of major palaces like Phaistos, Agitriada, and Knossos Zakros to collapse. The destruction of these central structures literally severed the physical palace logistics.
Broke the network.
Exactly. Think about it. These storage depots, the administrative centers, the workshops, all integrated into these structures. When the depots were destroyed, the systematic flow of surplus products, the lifeblood of their redistributive system, just ceased. This disruption had immediate and profound consequences. Rural communities, no longer able to rely on the palace for storage, security, or the distribution of essential goods, were forced to seek alternative autonomy. This erosion of central authority and the breakdown of the essential flow of goods severely weakened the very foundation of the Minoan redistributive system, leading to widespread destabilization.
So the Minoan system was already under immense internal stress from these repeated, catastrophic natural disasters. Then came what many describe as the final, definitive blow. What does this all mean for the Minoans and the remarkable palace economy they had built over centuries?
Well, while some initial recovery after the earthquake-tsunami damage might theoretically have been possible, the final, definitive blow seems to have come around 1450 BC. At this point, the weakened and destabilized palace authorities received a decisive intervention from Mycenaean elites. These were a more militaristic people, originating from the Greek mainland to the northeast.
Coming in from outside.
Yes. Their arrival in Crete, likely taking advantage of the widespread devastation and weakened central control, signified a fundamental and irreversible shift in regional power dynamics.
So, the ingenious Minoan system, after over a millennium, was finally replaced by a completely new order.
Essentially, yes. Knossos, remarkably, survived for a short period, continuing its operations. But significantly, it was now under new management and a new administrative system. This profound shift is clearly evidenced by the change in the administrative script found on tablets at Knossos. It goes from the undeciphered linear A, characteristic of the Minoans, to linear B, which is an early form of Greek used by the Mycenaeans.
It's a smoking gun, linguistically.
Absolutely. This marked the definitive end of the Minoan-based redistributive economy that had defined the island for centuries. It was replaced by a new Hellenic feudal land allocation system and entirely different administrative practices reflecting the Mycenaean model of governance. Thus, the palace economy, which had been so brilliantly established around 2700 BC and had enjoyed approximately 1250 years of continuous innovative operation, effectively ended after this devastating series of natural disasters and external intervention. 11. Legacy and historical importance.
As we look back, even though the Minoan palace economy physically crumbled, its influence, its innovations, they really echoed through history, didn't they? Laying crucial groundwork for future civilizations in the Aegean and beyond. What, in your view, was its most pioneering and enduring aspect?
Well, the Minoan palace economy stands out unequivocally as the first truly multi-layered, highly integrated administrative economic network in the entire Aegean basin during the second millennium BC. It wasn't just a collection of independent settlements. It was a sophisticated, interconnected system operating on a regional scale. It demonstrated a level of organizational complexity previously unseen in that part of the world. This meant it set an entirely new standard, both for material culture, evidenced by their exquisite crafts, grand architecture, standardized products, and, crucially, for complex management practices in the ancient world. It proved that large-scale organization was possible even without money.
And it's fascinating how their key innovations like centralized planning, sophisticated sea trade became absolutely fundamental to later societies. Their legacy isn't just in the incredible ruins, it's woven into the very fabric of later Greek history and even their enduring myths, isn't it?
Absolutely. The core elements of their system, centralized storage and strategic resource reserves, a meticulous record bureaucracy tracking every input and output, sophisticated sea trade coordination linking distant economies, and their complex religious ideological functionality. These lay the very foundation for the financial and administrative structures of later Mycenaean and even classical Greek city-states. These subsequent civilizations built on many of the organizational principles pioneered and perfected by the Minoans. Furthermore, this first comprehensive governance system for managing vast economic surplus reserves became deeply woven into cultural memory. Myths like the labyrinth, with its confusing, intricate pathways reflecting the complex palace structure. The Minotaur, symbolizing the perhaps terrifying power residing at the heart of such a system. Daedalus, the master artisan and engineer who built it all.
They're all reflections.
They seem to be direct reflections of this powerful, complex, and maybe sometimes bewildering system, transmitted to subsequent generations, shaping their understanding of their own past and the origins of complex society itself.
So even though the physical walls fell around 1450 BC, the Minoan palace economy really lives on in our understanding of how ancient civilization could achieve incredible feats of organization and prosperity.
Indeed. It remains in human memory as the first great laboratory for centralized planning and the dynamics of sea trade in ancient history. Their unique approach to managing vast resources without currency offers profound, timeless insights into alternative economic models. And it speaks to the sheer ingenuity, resilience, and sometimes, yes, the fragility of early human societies in the face of both innovation and unforeseen disaster. Outro.
What an incredible journey into the Minoan palace economy. From its unparalleled geographical advantages, its ingenious farming techniques, through its sophisticated redistribution system, its vibrant industrial hubs, its surprisingly detailed administrative tech, and its turbulent end. It truly was a pioneering civilization. Their ability to organize such a complex society, manage international trade, and thrive for over a millennium without a single coin is simply astounding.
It truly makes you reconsider our modern assumptions about economic development, doesn't it? The Minoans demonstrate the ingenious and highly adaptable ways ancient societies harnessed their environments, organized their labor, managed resources. They remind us that economic complexity isn't some recent invention. It's a testament to human ingenuity stretching back millennia. It proves there's more than one path to prosperity.
And this deep dive really leaves us with a compelling thought, I think. In our modern era of, instant gratification, digital currencies, globalized markets, what fundamental lessons can we truly draw from a society that flourished for over 1,000 years, on a system built fundamentally on trust, meticulous physical record keeping, and the collective centralized management of surplus? Perhaps there's a deeper, maybe more resilient definition of wealth to be found beyond the mere accumulation of capital.
Absolutely. The Minoans invite us to consider just how resilient and adaptable human societies can be, even when facing profound natural disasters and shifting geopolitical landscapes. Their story reminds us that understanding the why behind historical events, exploring the mechanisms of their success and their ultimate collapse, often reveals profound insights that resonate deeply with our own present challenges and, indeed, our future possibilities.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Minoan palace economy. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and perhaps a lot more curious about the hidden complexities and the enduring lessons of the ancient world. Until next time.